On the morning of my 70th birthday, I found a small white box on the porch. Gold ribbon tied carefully, and on top, a card engraved with Sophia's name in delicate outlines I hadn't seen in years. My chest tightened at the sight of it. The care, the precision. It was more thoughtful than anything she'd ever sent me, even back when we were close. Tears welled up before I could stop them. I held that box for a long time, pressing it to my chest as if it could bridge all the years of silence. No calls, no letters, and now, this. A gift so carefully made, it felt like it could warm me for months. But I never imagined that the gift bringing me tears of joy that morning would make me cry for many nights afterward. Before I tell you why, just leave a comment. Where are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe, so you won't miss the next story that cuts even deeper than family. 70. The number felt heavy the moment I opened my eyes. Not like a milestone, more like a warning. You don't celebrate 70, you survive it. The house was still, too still. I patted across the floorboards, listening to the refrigerator hum and the clock tick like it had nothing better to do. I made coffee out of habit, not hunger. The first sip tasted flat, bitter. I set the mug down, staring at the streak of sunlight crawling across the kitchen table. And for a moment I thought, so this is it. Another birthday alone. But then I saw it, a small white box on the porch. Gold ribbon tied so neatly it caught the light like it was proud of itself. And on top, a card. My hands froze when I saw the name, Sophia. Written in those careful, looping letters I hadn't seen since she was a girl, making birthday banners with crayons, tongue caught between her teeth as she tried to get every curve just right. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened until it hurt. I picked it up with both hands like it was something fragile, something alive. The ribbon was smooth under my fingers, the card pressed flat as though she had ironed it. I had never seen her pour that kind of detail into anything she gave me, not even back when our bond was whole. And it broke me. Tears I didn't feel I deserved slid down my cheeks. I pulled that box against my chest and held it there. Longer than any man should ever hold a dessert. Because it wasn't just sugar and cream. It was proof. Proof that she still thought of me. After years of silence, no calls on Father's Day, no surprise visits, no notes at Christmas, here it was. Her name, her hand, her gift. Inside lay a cheesecake. Small, elegant, fragile. The kind of thing you only see behind glass in those upscale bakeries where people line up on weekends to taste a slice of something they can't afford. It wasn't careless. It wasn't ordinary. She had chosen it. For me. I sat at the table, staring at it for what felt like hours. My hands twitched with the urge to break the ribbon, to cut a slice, to taste every bit of her thoughtfulness. But the truth pressed in just as fast. I couldn't. My diabetes doesn't forgive mistakes. Not anymore. A bite of that cake wasn't sweetness. It was risk. And I'll admit it. I considered it. Considered doubling my pills, chasing each forkful with water, anything to let me take her gift into my own body. Because maybe, just maybe, eating it would feel like accepting her hand across all those years. But I couldn't. My hands shook too badly just holding the thought, so I wrestled with it. I wanted to keep it, but not waste it. I wanted to taste her love, but not gamble with death. And then one face came to mind. Henry. Henry, my neighbor. My oldest friend. The man who showed up with a hammer before I even admitted something was broken. The one who sat on my porch when Linda passed, saying nothing, just keeping the silence from swallowing me whole. He had been here for every lonely year, every busted pipe, every night the walls felt too wide. If anyone deserved to share this gift in my place, it was him. I wiped my eyes, steadied my breath, and made a choice. I would give Henry the cheesecake, but I would keep the box, the card, the ribbon. I would set them on the mantel where I could see them every day. So even if I couldn't taste it, I could remember. I could hold on to the proof that she had reached out. When I crossed the street, the sun was higher, glinting off the ribbon like it was still proud of itself. The box felt heavier than it should have, not in weight, but in meaning. Henry opened the door with his usual rag in hand, the smell of motor oil and pine cleaner drifting out like it lived in the walls. "What's this?" he asked, squinting into the light. I forced a smile. "Birthday gift, but I can't have it. Thought maybe you'd help me out." His eyes flicked from the cake to me. He didn't ask the obvious questions. Henry never did. But there was something in his look, something that said he understood more than I'd said out loud. He clapped my shoulder harder than usual. "Then I'll eat it for both of us." I tried to laugh, but it came out thin, shaky, like it didn't belong in my throat. My hands lingered on the box more than they should have, fingers brushing the ribbon as if I wasn't ready to let go. Henry saw it. He always saw more than I said. He placed his rag aside, gently lifted the lid, and with a kind of care that almost undid me, he slid the cheesecake out onto his counter. Then he pressed the empty box, the ribbon, and the card back into my hands. "Keep this," he said softly, his eyes steady on mine. "Looks like it means more than what's inside." I swallowed hard, nodding, too choked to answer. Walking back across the street, the box felt lighter, but my chest didn't. I held it close like it might slip away if I let go. Back home, I placed the box, the ribbon, and the card carefully on the mantel, smoothing the ribbon flat, propping the card where the light could reach it, and turning the box so its gold trim faced out. It was as if the whole corner of the room could remember she still thought of me. For the first time in years, that corner looked alive. I sat in my chair, staring at them, my heart heavy but warmed, still trembling with a quiet emotion I hadn't felt in years, telling myself I'd made the right decision. I didn't know then that this decision, one that felt so reasonable, so safe, was the line I'd stepped over. A line that nearly cost me the only friend I had left. The phone rang just after dusk. Not the polite chime of a salesman, not the steady buzz of a neighbor. It was sharp, too sharp for a quiet house. It bounced off the kitchen walls, cutting through the hum of the refrigerator and the faint smell of old coffee I hadn't gotten around to throwing out. I dried my hands on a dish towel and picked it up. "Hello?" A pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years. Softer than memory, but thinner too, like it had been stretched across a distance too wide. "Dad?" My throat locked tight. The word cracked something open in me. "Sophia," I said, the syllables stumbling out like strangers who knew they belonged but hadn't been home in years. I hadn't said her name aloud in so long it felt foreign on my tongue, like dust shaken from an attic box. She didn't let the moment breathe. Did you eat it?" No hello. No small talk. Straight into it. My stomach twisted. Eat what? But I already knew. The image of the cheesecake box empty on Henry's counter flashed like lightning in my mind. "The cake, Dad. I need to know if you had it." That word. Need. It didn't sound like care. It sounded like urgency disguised in the clothes of concern, a demand more than a question. I tightened my grip on the receiver, the cord twisting around my wrist. "No," I said slowly, dragging the word out, tasting suspicion with every syllable. "I gave it to Henry." Silence. A silence that wasn't empty but heavy. I thought the line had dropped. I could hear my own breathing, ragged. The refrigerator kicked on, a low growl in the background. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it had all day. Sound itself seemed to retreat from the house. When she spoke again, her voice was clipped. Flat. "You gave it away?" "He's a good friend," I said, trying to make it sound casual, though my voice cracked in the middle. "I thought he'd appreciate it more than me." Another long pause. Then, almost too soft to catch, "You shouldn't have done that." And the line went dead. The dial tone hummed in my ear, steady and merciless. My hand trembled against the receiver until sweat slicked my palm. I set it back in its cradle, but the sound clung to my bones like static that wouldn't leave. The kitchen lights flickered once. Just once. Enough to make the hairs on my arms rise. I glanced toward the window. The blinds swayed, though no breeze touched them. The street outside was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was reading too much into a call I had prayed for on sleepless nights. My daughter had reached out. Wasn't that what I'd wanted all this time? But the way she asked, the way she fell silent, it didn't feel like love. It felt like something else. I filled a glass at the sink. The faucet groaned as water rushed out. I drank too fast, the rim clinking against my teeth. But even the water tasted wrong, metallic, bitter at the back of my tongue. I set the glass down too hard. It cracked against the counter, the sound cutting through the kitchen like a warning. I gripped the counter, heart pounding, and my mind reached backward, desperate for something steady. I remembered Sophia at 16, standing in this same kitchen. We'd argued about selling the old farm, her eyes blazing at me like I'd betrayed her. She stormed out, arms stiff at her sides, and for days she didn't speak to me. Not even when her mother tried to coax her with her favorite cheesecake recipe. I can still see her in the doorway, arms crossed, glare sharp enough to cut me down. And before that, laughter. Her laughter. High and careless, back when she was little, back when Linda was alive and the house rang with noise. How quickly it all hardened into silence. That silence had stretched across the years, and now, hearing her voice again, it felt like the silence itself had learned how to speak through her. The phone sat heavy on its cradle. I stared at it, half expecting it to ring again, to bring some explanation that could ease the knot in my chest. But it didn't. Just silence. Louder than any call. I wandered through the house, each step echoing in rooms too big for one man. The walls carried Linda's absence like a shadow I couldn't step out of. Her framed photos watched me from the hall, her smile frozen, her eyes filled with questions I couldn't answer. If she'd been here, maybe she would have known what Sophia's silence meant. Maybe she would have known what to do with that cake. In the living room, I stopped by the bookshelf. The smell of old paper and wood polish rose as I reached for the frame on the top shelf. Sophia at 8, curled in Linda's lap, arms around her mother's neck, cheeks flushed from laughing too hard. I brushed my thumb over the glass. How could that little girl become the voice that had just told me I shouldn't have given away her gift? A draft crept through the front door, rattling the frame in my hands. I set it back too quickly, nearly knocking over a stack of magazines. My nerves were raw. Every sound struck like broken glass. Even the settling of the house felt like footsteps following me. I locked the doors before bed. Each bolt sliding home echoed louder than usual, like a warning carried through metal. The floorboards groaned under me, every creak making me pause, ears straining. When I finally lay down, the mattress groaned beneath my weight. I stared at the ceiling, eyes wide, waiting for sleep that wouldn't come. Shadows pooled in the corners, stretching and shifting as if they carried secrets. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, they grew louder with every second, pressing against my ears until they felt like voices. I waited for another call, waited for some explanation. None came. Just silence, heavy and watchful. And in that silence, I felt it, the beginning of a storm. Morning came without rest. My body ached from lying stiff all night, eyes burning from staring too long at the ceiling. The house felt different, too still, too heavy, as though it were holding its breath. I shuffled into the kitchen, the floorboards creaking under my weight. I set the kettle on and waited for its familiar whistle, just to have something steady. Steam curled into the air, sharp against the stale scent of yesterday's grounds. Then the phone rang. Not the same sharp ring from last night. This one dragged, long and heavy, like it didn't want to be answered. My chest tightened as I picked it up. "Michael? It's Henry's wife." Her voice cracked, thin with panic. Behind her I could hear shouts, the hiss of oxygen, the clipped urgency of a nurse barking orders. "He collapsed. They've rushed him to the hospital. He's not waking up." The world narrowed. My grip on the receiver clamped so tight my knuckles whitened. Words blurred together. Collapsed. Not waking up. Hospital. I pressed my forehead against the wall, the paint cool against my skin. My stomach heaved. Yesterday I had stood in his doorway handing him that box. He'd smiled, rag in hand, saying he'd eat it for both of us. The kettle shrieked behind me, steam rising wild. I slammed it off, burning my fingers, but I barely felt it. My breath came ragged, shallow. One thought hammered through me. If I hadn't passed it to him, it would have been me. The drive to the hospital was a blur of asphalt and stoplights that bled red across my windshield. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard I thought it might snap. Every corner I turned, Henry's laugh echoed in my ears. "Then I'll eat it for both of us." Those words clung now like a prophecy, one neither of us understood at the time. The hospital doors sighed open, releasing a sterile wave of antiseptic and cold light. The place buzzed. Nurses rushing, monitors beeping, voices calling codes I couldn't decipher. The world moved too fast, while I dragged through it like I was wading in concrete. Through a glass window, I saw him, Henry. Or what was left of him under the weight of machines. Tubes and wires wrapped around him like cruel vines. His chest rose and fell with the rhythm of a machine, not his own breath. His skin was gray, lips cracked. For a moment I didn't recognize him. My knees buckled against the doorway. His wife turned to me, eyes swollen, mascara bleeding down her face. "What happened, Michael?" "He was fine last night. He was laughing. He said you'd given him a cake." Her voice broke on the word. "What was in it?" I couldn't answer. My mouth opened, but only silence came. The smell of disinfectant mixed with something sweeter clinging to my hands, the ghost of that gold-foiled box. I wanted to scrub my skin raw. A doctor entered, clipboard in hand, voice clipped and clinical. "We found traces of an uncommon toxin in his system. We're running more tests, but it's not something that would appear naturally." He glanced at me, sharp. "Did he ingest anything unusual in the last 24 hours? The question cut me open. Images stormed in. The ribbon, the card with Sophia's loops, the weight of the box in my hands. My lips trembled. "There was a cake," I whispered. "Sent to me. I gave it to him." I hadn't just accepted a gift. I had passed the blade. The doctor frowned, scribbled notes, and left without another word. Henry's wife pulled closer to the bed, gripping his hand, whispering words I couldn't hear. My own hands shook so violently, I shoved them into my pockets, nails carving crescents into my palms. I stumbled out into the hallway. The hum of fluorescent lights grew into a roar. I pressed my back against the cold tile, sliding down until I was crouched low, my breath fogging though the air wasn't cold. And memory struck me uninvited. Sophia at 12, candlelight flickering on a cheesecake her mother baked. She'd beamed at me, cheeks flushed, pushing the first slice into my hands. "Try it, Dad. It's the best one yet." I had eaten every bite because her eyes asked me to, even though it was too sweet. The echo of that moment slammed into the present. Sophia's voice flat on the phone, her question too sharp. Her gift turned poison. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text. I pulled it out with shaking hands. "Did you eat it yet?" I knew whose number it was long before I saved it. No name. Just a number I didn't recognize. But I knew. Every part of me knew. I stared at the words until they blurred, my thumb hovering uselessly over the screen. My chest rose and fell like I'd been running, though I hadn't moved an inch. Finally, I shoved the phone back into my pocket, as if burying it could erase what it meant. In the reflection of the glass door, I caught sight of myself, shoulders hunched, face ashen, eyes hollow. 70 years old, and I had never felt smaller. The truth pressed against me, undeniable. That cake was never meant for Henry. It was meant for me. I stumbled outside, the evening air biting into my lungs. The parking lot buzzed with ordinary life, engines starting, horns honking, doors slamming, but I felt none of it. I leaned against my car, nails scraping the hood. "Why, Sophia?" I whispered into the night. The words vanished into the wind, leaving only silence in their place. I drove home with the hospital smell still clinging to my clothes, antiseptic and something metallic that had nothing to do with the air. It sat in my nose like a warning I couldn't shake. The house met me with its old sounds, the low hum of the refrigerator, the tick of a tired clock, each one a reminder that time keeps moving whether you want it to or not. I set my keys on the counter and stood there long enough for the silence to grow a spine. I took out my phone, thumb hovering over Jack's number. I hadn't called him in months. The last time was about a leaky pipe I couldn't fix alone. He'd come over with his toolkit, grumbling but smiling, muttering that I always waited until the water was ankle-deep before admitting defeat. He'd stayed after, shared a beer, and refused to take money for the parts. This call felt nothing like that. My finger hesitated over the button. It wasn't just a friend I was calling this time. It was a man I was dragging into something darker than a busted pipe. It rang twice. "Michael?" His voice was sandpaper and warmth at once. "Jack," I said, and the word felt steadier than I expected. "I need your head and your habits. Tell me where." He didn't ask what. Men like Jack understand that the question can ruin the evidence. His garage smelled like oil and old leather, the kind that tells you a man fixes things more than he breaks them. A single bulb dangled from the ceiling, drawing a slow halo on the concrete. He handed me a box of zip-top bags and a pair of nitrile gloves without ceremony. "Start from the start," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "But don't give me feelings. Give me facts." "A box on my porch. Gold foil. Mini cheesecake." From Sophia. Her name tasted strange, spoken aloud. "I gave it to Henry. He ate it. He collapsed this morning." I paused, something catching in my throat. "Jack, I got a text, unlisted number, asking if I'd eaten it. And last night, Sophia called. First thing she asked, did I have the cake?" He didn't flinch. He listened the way cops do, with his mouth and his eyes closed. When I finished, he nodded once and pulled the lid off a plastic tote. Inside were evidence labels, alcohol wipes, a small notepad with a grid faintly printed on each page. "Chain of custody," he said, more to the room than to me. "We don't make conclusions. We make a trail." "I'm not trying to put my daughter in a cage," I said, quieter than I meant. The bulb above us buzzed, a moth batting itself numb against the glass. Jack met my eyes. "We're not trying anything. We're collecting the truth. It'll do what it does." The truth. I put on the gloves. They snapped at the wrist like a promise. We drove to Henry's house. The yard was too quiet, the wind chimes still, as if the day didn't dare touch anything he'd left behind. His garage door was half open, tools scattered on the bench as though he had only stepped away for a moment. A pair of boots still sat by the doormat, laces loose, waiting for feet that wouldn't return. His wife answered with eyes that had learned too much in too few hours. She stepped aside before I could ask, as if grief had made room for me in advance. "Kitchen," she said, and the word trembled. "He ate it there. I didn't wash anything. I couldn't." The plate sat where he'd set it, a white ring of porcelain holding a crescent of dried crumbs the color of old butter. A fork leaned against the edge, a smear the size of a fingerprint catching the light. The gold foil liner was crushed but intact, the pattern still pressed into its fluted sides. Beside the sink stood the box. Pale, elegant, the ribbon folded with the kind of care that makes your stomach turn. I wanted to touch none of it and all of it. Jack moved first. He photographed the counter at angles, the way you would a crime scene when you don't want to admit you're standing in one. He handed me a label. "Describe it," he said. "Mini cheesecake, residual crumbs, gold liner, original box," I said, writing slow enough to keep my hand from shaking. "Good," he said. "Now bag them. One item, one bag. We'll swab separately." The bags made soft sounds as they opened, the kind that make you feel like you're disturbing a sleeping animal. My gloved fingers fumbled, catching on the edges, while Jack's movements were precise, almost ritualistic. I slid the foil liner in first, then the fork, then the plate. The box last. My reflection bent and straightened in the plastic as I pressed the seals shut. "Anything else he touched?" Jack asked. I pointed to the small knife near the cutting board. A thin line of cream clung to the blade. He bagged it himself, his face doing nothing. Henry's wife stood in the doorway with her hands twisted into each other. "What was in it?" she whispered, as if her voice could wake something better than the answers she feared. Jack didn't look at her. "We'll let the lab tell us," he said gently. "What we think is less important than what we can prove." Her eyes moved to me, searching for a crack where comfort might fit. I had none to offer. "I shouldn't have brought it here," I said, and the sentence felt both true and insufficient. She shook her head. "He was happy you did." The words hit like a soft hammer. Back in my kitchen, Jack cleared a corner of the table and laid out what we'd collected. He moved like a man praying, efficient, precise, leaving nothing out he could keep in. He swabbed the fork and the knife, the inside of the box where the liner had pressed, even the underside of the plate. He labeled each swab with the tiny pen he kept behind his ear. "Where'd the cake come from?" he asked. "A boutique place by the look of it. Downtown, gold foil, no return label." He turned the box over, peering at the seam with a small flashlight. "There," he said, tapping a dot the size of a pinhead. "Thermal printed batch code. Not standard retail. Could be corporate catering, could be specialty order. Either way, traceable." The word landed with weight. Traceable. If we could follow the code, we could follow the intent. He packed the swabs into a crush-proof case and set it near his elbow. "I can get preliminary tests through a friend who owes me twice. Won't be official, but it'll tell us whether we're hunting a plant alkaloid, a synthetic, or something we don't want to say out loud." "Plant," I said, hearing the hope in my own voice. "Let it be something old and dumb. Let it be something I can blame on the earth instead of a person." Jack didn't answer. He wrote a time, a date, and my name next to each line on the notepad. On the way out to his truck, a small movement caught my eye, a shadow sliding along my front window like a hand smoothing cloth. I stopped. The street was empty except for a garbage can lid rolling an inch in a wind I couldn't feel. "You got a camera?" he asked. "No, a deadbolt and a habit," I said. "Habits are good," he said, "until they're not." He reached into the tote again and handed me a small spool of thread and 2 pieces of clear tape. "Old school tell," he said. "Set it low across the inside of the doorframe. You'll know if someone thinks your house is theirs." The thread looked like nothing and felt like everything when I stuck it down just above the threshold. I stood a long time after, watching it not move, the stillness saying more than motion ever could. We drove the samples to a small lab on the edge of town, where Jack's friend worked nights to avoid people and daylight. The place smelled like ethanol and stale coffee. A radio muttered a ball game to no one. The tech, thin, tired eyes and a wedding band he spun with his thumb, didn't ask questions either. He signed Jack's sheet, accepted the case, and said, 2 hours if it's obvious, 4 if it's stubborn. We killed time in the parking lot, windows down, the night air holding a hint of rain. Jack drummed 2 fingers on the steering wheel, not a rhythm so much as a reminder that he was still here. After a while, he told me about nights when he was still on the force, waiting outside operating rooms, trying not to think about the lives on the other side of the door. "It's the same silence," he said. "Doesn't matter if it's a bullet or a poison. Waiting sounds the same." His words dragged me back to Linda. To the night I sat outside her hospital room, counting the tiles on the ceiling, trying not to listen to the machines. The silence then had felt like a beast pacing the hallway, daring me to believe it wouldn't pounce. That same silence was here now, in this parking lot, wrapped around my throat. "You going to call the police?" Jack asked, not as advice, not as challenge, just fact. I stared at the lab door. If we're right, calling them means turning a key I can't unturn. "She's your daughter?" "Yes." "Henry is your friend?" "Yes." I blew out a breath that didn't want to leave. I don't know how to be both a father and a witness. Jack didn't look at me. "You be a man who keeps people breathing. The labels come later." The lab door opened at 11:13 p.m. The tech waved us in, his mouth set. He pointed to a monitor where graphs marched like bad news. Whatever came next would either clear a child or confirm a nightmare. "Prelim only," he said. "But the fork, knife, and liner all show an extract consistent with a potent plant-based toxin. Concentration is higher along the fork tines and the liner's creases. Whatever it is, it binds fat. Cream. Cheesecake makes a decent delivery system." The room tilted slightly. The word cheesecake hung there, heavy as if it had learned its own meaning. "Name?" Jack asked. The tech shook his head. "I won't guess. The state lab will. But if you're asking me whether this is negligent contamination or deliberate, I'm not seeing negligence. Deliberate." The syllables tasted like metal. We drove back to my house in silence. Jack turned off the engine and didn't move to open the door. "You know what this means," he said finally. "It means the cake wasn't an accident," I said, my voice steady in a way that scared me. "It also means we don't get to pretend we can handle this alone." He pulled a card from his wallet and pushed it across the console. A detective's name I didn't know. A number, a badge embossed in blue foil. "He's straight. He'll listen before he talks." I stared at the card and saw Sophia's handwriting instead. 2 words on a white card. The same neat slant from when she was 8 and too proud of her loops to breathe while she wrote. "Happy birthday." "I'll call in the morning," I said. Jack studied me. "Call now." "My head needs the night to catch up," I said. "My heart needs it more." He accepted that, which I hated him for and loved him for at once. He put the truck in gear. "I'll be back at 9. If you haven't called, I will." Inside, the house had cooled into something close to brittle. I checked the thread at the door. Motionless. In the kitchen, I pulled a small fireproof box from the pantry and set it on the table. I lined the bottom with a manila envelope and slid the lab receipt inside. Then the photos Jack had printed before we left. Then the copy of his chain of custody sheet he'd made me request. I added the dead phone with the unknown text, the battery pulled, just in case paranoia had a point. The box shut with a soft, certain click. I brewed tea and didn't drink it. I sat in the chair I always sit in, the one angled to see down the hall to the front door, and watched the thread like it was a lifeline. The night thinned. Every sound declared itself. Pipes, boards, the soft rush of a car 2 streets over. I got up twice to check the locks again. Once to peer out the window even though I knew I'd see nothing. Just before sleep finally worked its way under my eyelids, my phone buzzed once, low and mean on the table. No ringtone, just the vibration of something that didn't want to be heard. I picked it up. No name, a single message. "Next time, don't share." If I was right, morning wouldn't just bring answers. It would bring a badge. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just watched the words until the screen went black and I could see my face staring back. Older than 70. Older than the years I'd earned. In the morning, I would call the number on the blue-foiled card. In the morning, I would step across whatever line this was. But in that knife edge of night, with the thread unbroken and the house holding its breath with me, All I could do was sit with a truth that didn't care what I called it. Someone had turned love into a delivery system, and I'd passed it along with my own hands. The morning didn't arrive. It dragged me out of the night. I hadn't slept, only shifted from one side to the other while the hours stacked on my chest like bricks. By the time the curtains bled pale light into the room, I felt 100 years old. The fireproof box still sat on the table, heavier than its metal, heavier than its contents. Every time my eyes touched it, I could hear that text whispering again. Next time, don't share. Jack's truck coughed into the driveway at 9 sharp. His knock was more habit than question, because a second later the door swung open. He came in with a paper bag, grease seeping through, bacon and toast fighting for dominance. He set it on the counter. "Eat," he said, but his eyes went straight to the box. "You call yet?" I shook my head. Silence was enough of an answer. Jack sat heavy in the chair, elbows planted on his knees, the rag still hanging from his back pocket, like he'd just come from fixing something. "Michael, the longer you wait, the less say you have. Right now, you can still decide how this story gets told. Wait too long, and it tells itself." Before I could speak, my phone buzzed against the table. A vibration sharp as a wasp's wings, the same number, no name. This time it wasn't words, it was a photo. My porch, taken from above, grainy but unmistakable. Me, bent over, sweater slipping from one shoulder, lifting the cheesecake box. Underneath, "That was meant for you." My throat closed like a blade had pressed itself inside. My stomach pitched so violently, I gripped the chair to keep from falling. Jack leaned over, his jaw tightening as he read. "She's not warning you," he said. "She's letting you know she's been watching." The walls pressed inward. The smell of grease from Jack's bag turned sour in my nose. I pushed away from the chair, slippers dragging against the floor. I couldn't stay still. That photo dragged me backward, all the way to the farm, to the night she was 16, standing in the living room, fists balled, tears sharp in her eyes. "You're erasing her," she had screamed. "This was Mom's, every flower, every shelf, you're throwing her away." "She's gone, Sophia," I'd snapped, my grief jagged as glass. "We can't live inside ghosts." Her sneakers hammered down the porch steps, gravel scattering like sparks. The slam of the door still rattled inside me. I didn't know it then, but that was the day she stopped being mine. The farm had been too much. Acres collapsing into weeds, barns sagging into themselves, bills swelling. I sold it. I told myself it was survival. I told myself she'd understand one day. She never did. To her, I hadn't sold land. I had buried her mother a second time. Jack cleared his throat, pen ready in his hand. "Tell me everything. No shortcuts." So I did. I told him about the slammed doors, the threatened lawsuits she waved through lawyers who barely knew her. The birthdays missed one after another. I told him about the gravel road where she walked away, sun in her hair like Linda's, but her eyes hard, cold. Jack scribbled as I spoke, his face carved from stone. When I finished, he tapped the pen against the paper. "That's motive. Old wound, left open too long. Resentment ferments." "I can't accept that," I whispered. "She's my daughter." "She's not 12 anymore," he said, softer than I expected. "She's not the girl with flour on her cheeks. Anger grows teeth." His words cut deep, but another memory cut deeper. Sophia at 12, sitting on the porch swing with Linda. Notebook on her lap, sketching herbs, scrawled labels under every leaf. "Someday I'll be a scientist," she'd said, bright with certainty. Linda kissed her hair and told her she already was. I could smell the day again. The porch creaking in the sun. Lavender perfume on Linda's blouse. Graphite smudges on Sophia's fingers as she shaded petals with care. That memory warmed me for a moment, then shattered like glass dropped on stone. That afternoon, while Jack stepped outside to make hushed calls to a detective he trusted, I sat at the computer. The blue glow painted my face in the window, bruised and hollow. I clicked through old bookmarks I hadn't touched in years. Most were dead, recipes, hiking routes, quotes about resilience. Then I saw it. A forum account. Username, Sophie Star. The nickname Linda used when Sophia was small. I clicked. At first it was harmless. Chamomile for sleep, peppermint for headaches. Then the tone shifted. Nightshade, digitalis. Threads on historic poisoning cases, written with a fascination that chilled me. And then I found it. A PDF titled Silent Poisons of the Past. I opened it. Page after page of diagrams, recipes, dosage notes, lines underlined, sections highlighted, scribbles in the margins, fat soluble, low dose effective, cheese chalk-quantum carrier. My stomach lurched. Bile burned my throat. Cheesecake wasn't chance. It was design. I scrolled. White snake root. Causes tremors, vomiting, heart failure, undetectable in small doses, historically fatal through milk and cream. Milk, cream, cheesecake. I saw it, myself at the table, fork raised, one bite too many, my chest clamping, my breath strangled short, my hand clawing air. The vision hit so hard I stumbled back from the desk. The chair screeched across the floor as I shoved away, back hitting the wall. My chest rose and fell like I'd been drowning. When Jack came back, I showed him. His finger traced the underlined words, his face unreadable. But the silence around him thickened until I thought I'd choke on it. She studied this, he said finally. This isn't carelessness. This is intent. I clutched the edge of the desk until my fingers screamed. Why now? Why after all these years? He closed the laptop. Because 70 looks like an ending. Because she thinks you're tired. Because grief doesn't keep calendars. I wanted to scream. Instead, I turned to the rain sliding down the window. And suddenly, I was back on the farm again. The barn groaning under wind, the orchard heavy with fruit. Linda humming in the kitchen. Sophia chasing fireflies barefoot through the grass. I remembered telling her, "This land will always be yours." I hadn't kept that promise. Later, restless, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Linda's journals lay inside, lavender still clinging faintly to their covers. I flipped through until her words spilled out. She clings to things the way I cling to people. If she loses something she loves, she'll hold the hurt like a stone. Heavy, but close. I pressed the book to my chest. That was my daughter. That was her wound. Close to midnight, my phone buzzed again. One line. Did you enjoy the surprise? The glow lit my face in the dark glass of the window. My reflection was hollow. Older than 70. Older than all the years I'd earned. I didn't reply. Couldn't. Why, Sophia? I whispered into the silence. The house held its breath. The rain outside gave no answer. The message still burned in my pocket. Did you enjoy the surprise? I hadn't answered. Didn't need to. The silence between us had already written its reply. When dawn crept in, I felt older than my 70 years, as though every wrinkle on my face had tallied another failure. Jack pressed me hard to call the detective. He sat across the table, arms crossed, jaw tight, every inch of him waiting for me to do the sensible thing. I nodded, lied with my eyes. Pretended I would. But something in me, stubborn, blind, maybe foolish, insisted that before police, before reports, there had to be us, father and daughter, face to face. When I dialed, rain drummed steady against the glass. She picked up quick. Too quick. Dad. Her voice was calm, like water left too long, clear on top but rotten underneath. We need to talk, I rasped. In person. A pause stretched long enough to feel deliberate. Her breathing was quiet, measured, as though she had rehearsed this moment. Fine, she said at last. The farm. Tonight. The farm. The place that broke us. By the time my tires turned onto the gravel drive, dusk had collapsed into storm, The sky pressed low, clouds bruised, lightning stitching them together. The barn leaned into the dark like a broken rib. Windows in the house stared empty, glass long gone. Weeds had claimed the porch steps, curling up the wood like fingers. The farm smelled of mold, rust, and rain-soaked soil, of promises left to rot. And there she was. Sophia stood beneath the porch roof, arms crossed, rain streaking her hair into ropes. She didn't flinch when I slammed the car door, didn't move when I stepped into the mud. "You came," she said flatly. "I had to," I whispered. "You're my daughter." She laughed, short, jagged. "Now you remember." The swing creaked in the wind, banging against the siding. I remembered her curled there once, legs folded, reading plant names to Linda as if every word were a spell. That memory cracked under the weight of the storm. "Why?" My voice cracked with it. "Why would you do this to me?" Her eyes lit like struck flint. "You already know. You sold her, you sold us. That land was Mom, Dad, and you auctioned her memory off like scrap." "I sold it to survive," I said, my throat raw. "I thought I was protecting you." "You thought about yourself." Her shout cut through the storm like a blade. "You let her die, then buried her again with a check, and you wanted me to smile and call it love?" Lightning split the sky, bleaching the farm in white. For a second I saw not only fury but something raw, hurt, festering too long, and under it all, grief. "I never stopped loving you," I whispered. "Love?" She spat it like poison. "If that's love, I don't want it." Her hand slid inside her coat, my chest seized. When it came out, glass glinted under the porch light. A vial, liquid pale as water, but heavy as lead. "This," she said, raising it, "is justice. The only kind you left me." Rain hammered harder. My heartbeat drowned out the thunder. "Sophia, please. You don't have to." "You were supposed to eat that cake," she hissed. "You were supposed to choke on what you gave me, to finally feel loss." She stepped forward, boots sinking in mud. I stepped back without thinking. The porch groaned under her weight. The swing banged louder. My throat was sand. "If you wanted me dead, why didn't you let the cake finish it? Why come here?" Her jaw tightened. The vial shook in her hand. "Because I wanted to see your face. I wanted to watch fear crawl over the man who made me invisible. And what do you see now?" My voice was low, barely audible over the rain. Her eyes flickered. Anger, grief, then something fragile, gone as quick as it came. "I see a coward, too weak to keep promises, too weak to keep Mom alive." I stepped forward, though my knees threatened to buckle. "I see my daughter. One I failed. One who deserved more than silence. But killing me won't bring her back. It'll only bury you too." The storm swallowed us whole. She trembled, the vial rising, lowering, rising again. My breath snagged. For a heartbeat, time slowed. The raindrops fat and separate. Thunder a faraway drum. Her hand shook so violently, I thought the glass might break on its own. Her lips parted. "Do you feel it now? Do you know what it's like to hold death in your hands?" "No," I said, my lips quivering. "All I feel is losing you. Again." Her face twisted. For a terrible instant, I thought she would drink it herself, or smash it against my chest. I saw it. Glass splintering, liquid soaking through my shirt, searing me the way her silence had seared me for years. Then, with a cry torn from somewhere deep, she hurled the vial into the mud. Glass shattered, liquid bleeding black into the soil. A smell rose, acrid, bitter, before the rain washed it away. She collapsed onto the steps, sobs shaking her body. Her hair plastered to her face, her shoulders heaving. I dropped to my knees beside her, rain soaking me through. "Sophia." My hand lifted, hovering, then settling toward her shoulder. She flinched, yanked away. "Don't touch me," she rasped. "Not now, not ever." Footsteps echoed behind us. "Sophia." Jack stepped from the dark, gun low, eyes sharp, his voice calm, cut from steel. It's over. Don't make it worse. Her head whipped around. Fury blazed. You brought him? I didn't, I said quickly. He came because he cares. Jack's gaze never left her trembling hands. Walk away, Sophia. Right now. Or this moment writes the rest of your life. Her chest heaved. The farm seemed to groan with her, wood creaking, tin rattling in the barn. You can't erase years with words, she said, voice breaking. And you can't heal years with poison, Jack replied. Her hands clenched, unclenched. Her eyes darted between us. The father who failed her, the man with the gun. The storm raged louder, but all I could hear was her breath, shallow, ragged, breaking. Then her body sagged. Her fists dropped. She buried her face in her palms. Jack lowered his gun and radioed in, voice clipped, professional. I barely heard him. My world had already cracked. Minutes later, red and blue lights washed the farm in their cold glow. Officers splashed through the mud, lifting her gently but firmly to her feet, binding her hands. She didn't fight. She didn't look at me. Not once. As they led her past, I whispered her name. She hesitated for half a second, just enough for me to see her cheek, pale, streaked with rain and tears. Then she walked on, swallowed by uniforms and storm. I stood frozen. Rain streaked my face, but it couldn't wash away what I'd lost. The farm loomed empty behind me, a skeleton of promises. And I knew this wasn't the end. The porch, the rain, the vial. It was only the opening act. The real reckoning waited beneath courthouse lights, where I would no longer be just a father, but a witness. The courthouse smelled of polish and damp coats, a scent that clung to everything but couldn't cover the mildew underneath. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, cutting beams across dust that danced like it had nowhere else to be. My shoes clicked too loud against the marble floor, every step an echo that felt less like walking and more like being dragged. Sophia was already seated. Her posture was stiff, her hands laced tight in her lap. A plain blouse, hair pulled back so taut it looked painful. Red marks still traced faint circles on her wrists where the cuffs had been. She didn't look at me, not once. That hurt worse than the chains. Jack leaned close as I sat down. His whisper was gravel. Steady. Don't let their words twist you. I nodded, but my chest was already cinched. Today, I wasn't her father. Today, I was her witness. The prosecutor began. His voice snapped through the air, sharp, clipped, deliberate. He laid out the evidence piece by piece. The toxicology reports, the forum posts under her name, the PDF with her notes in the margins. Each document landed heavy, like hammer blows against the silence. Then it was my turn. I swore the oath, my throat catching on the last word. The chair was too hard beneath me, the microphone too close. I could hear my own breath magnified in the speakers, shaky, uneven. Mr. Whitmore, the prosecutor said, describe the cake you received on your birthday. So I told them. About the gold ribbon, the white box, how it sat waiting on my porch, how I handed it to Henry because I couldn't eat it myself. How Sophia called later, her first words not happy birthday, but, did you eat it? My voice cracked as I repeated those words. A silence followed that seemed to weigh down the room. Even the jury sat rigid, eyes fixed. The prosecutor stepped back, satisfied. Then the defense rose. A younger man, suit pressed sharp, voice smooth as glass. He paced, slow and confident, a faint smile playing at the edge of his mouth. Mr. Whitmore, he began, you admit your relationship with your daughter has been estranged. Yes. And this estrangement began after you sold the family farm. Yes. He turned to the jury, softening his tone like he was coaxing children. So isn't it possible your interpretation is colored? That your bitterness shaped how you viewed this cake? My jaw tightened. No. He circled back. You never ate the cake. You only assumed it was poisoned because your friend fell ill. Isn't it equally likely the dessert was spoiled, that this was a tragic accident? But the verdict that mattered wouldn't come from science. It would come from her mouth. Spoiled. The word rang hollow, flimsy as paper. My voice came out harsher than I meant. She sent it to me. She asked if I'd eaten it. And after Henry collapsed, I got a message. Next time, don't share. The lawyer's smile twitched, just slightly. Or perhaps a poor joke misunderstood. Years of tension could make any message feel darker than it was. My hands gripped the railing until my knuckles blanched. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was intent. He flinched. Only a flicker, then smoothed his face and stepped back. And then they called her. Sophia rose. Her steps were measured, but her shoulders were tight, rigid as if each one carried stones. She swore the oath in a voice steady enough to fool strangers. Then she sat, eyes fixed somewhere past the jury box, past all of us. Never on me. Her lawyer softened his tone, almost tender. Sophia, did you send your father a cake? Yes. Why? I wanted to reach out. Did you intend him any harm? No. He gave a small nod, as though the case had just folded neatly closed. But the prosecutor wasn't done. He rose, voice hard, cutting through the room. Miss Whitmore, do you participate in forums concerning toxic plants? Her jaw flexed. Yes. He held up the PDF. Do you recognize this document? Yes. Are these your notes in the margins? Her eyes flickered, just once. Yes. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Shoes shifting, someone coughing, a pen clattering to the floor. The prosecutor stepped closer. His voice sharpened. In these notes, you wrote cheese, Dr. Carrier. Isn't it true you designed the cake specifically to deliver poison? Her chest rose quick, then stalled. No, those were academic notes. Research. Research. The word hung in the room like smoke, sour and lingering. The prosecutor pressed in. Then explain this. The night Henry collapsed, you texted your father. Did you enjoy the surprise? Her lips parted, closed. Her hands twisted together so tightly, her knuckles bleached white, as if she could strangle the words back inside. Was the surprise his gift? The prosecutor demanded. Or his death? The room held its breath for the only answer that could break me. The silence cracked sharp. Finally, barely audible. It wasn't supposed to be him. The words detonated. Gasps rolled through the room. My chest caved, breath ripped from me. Her lawyer leapt up, shouting objections, desperate to stuff the words back into her throat. The judge's gavel hammered for order, but I didn't hear it. I heard only her voice, circling, echoing. It wasn't supposed to be him. The rest blurred. More questions, half-answers, legal words stacked like bricks I couldn't lift. My eyes never left her. She seemed smaller now, hollowed out like a storm had passed through and left her frame but nothing inside. When recess was called, the jury filed out in silence, their shoes whispering against the marble. The judge vanished to chambers. The lawyers clustered like buzzards. I sat still, watching her, my daughter. Once barefoot on the porch steps, chasing fireflies, now shackled by her own choices, her own grief. Jack's hand rested on my shoulder, firm, steady. You did what you had to. But my heart knew different, because justice wasn't what I saw. What I saw was a child poisoned long before she ever lifted a vial. Poisoned by grief, poisoned by silence, poisoned by me. The jury filed back in after what felt like a lifetime. Their faces were masks, unreadable, eyes hidden by shadows cast from the tall windows above. The silence pressed thick against the chamber walls. I heard everything too sharply. The rasp of a chair leg behind me, the scratch of someone's pen, the hammer of my own pulse in my ears. Sophia sat across the room, her hands folded neatly in her lap, wrists faintly marked where the cuffs had bitten. She didn't glance my way. Her chin lifted, steady, but her skin was pale, as though the storm inside her had burned itself out, leaving only ash. All rise. The judge's gavel cracked through the stillness. The foreman stood, paper trembling slightly in his hand. His voice was flat, but the words carved through me. We, the jury, find the defendant, Sophia Whitmore, guilty of attempted murder in the first degree. The words didn't just land, they split me open. For a heartbeat, I prayed I'd misheard. But the echo in the chamber nailed them into me. Sophia didn't flinch. No tears, no collapse. Just stillness, as though the verdict had been echoing inside her long before it reached us. The air around her felt heavier than chains. The judge spoke of sentencing, of years and statutes, rehabilitation and custody. His voice blurred. What I heard instead was her voice on the porch, raw as the storm. You sold her. You sold us. When the gavel struck again, the room exhaled. Papers shuffled. Deputies stirred. The jury whispered. But I stayed fixed. My hands locked on the railing as if wood alone could keep me from splintering. They led her toward the door. I couldn't stop myself. Sophia. She paused, her head tilted just slightly, enough for me to see the curve of her cheek. Rain or tears, no one else could tell. But I knew. A father always knows. Then she walked on, swallowed by uniforms and steel. The sound of the door closing behind her was heavier than the verdict. It was final, a kind of death gavel couldn't name. Jack's hand landed on my shoulder. It's over, he said. But it wasn't. Days blurred into each other. Reporters swarmed outside, cameras flashing, voices barking questions I couldn't answer. Neighbors left casseroles on my porch, lids fogged with steam that cooled before I lifted them. The house smelled of onions and cheese, but I couldn't eat. At night, the beams groaned. The walls carried grief like another inhabitant. One evening, I pulled down a box from the attic. Inside were Sophia's childhood notebooks, pages of flowers and herbs, drawn first in crayon, later in pencil, then inked carefully as though permanence could protect them. Some spellings were crooked, charming in their mistakes. Lavender, daisy, peppermint. On the last page, a sunflower stretched tall and bold. Beneath it, a message in uneven letters. This one is for Dad, because he always looks at the sun even when it's too bright. My hand traced the page, smudging faded crayon. The paper smelled of dust and old summers. The words blurred as my eyes filled. I pressed the page to my chest, but it felt like holding ashes. Sentencing day arrived. The courtroom was thicker than before. Damp coats, sour coffee, the restless hum of whispers. More faces this time, drawn by the weight of spectacle. The judge's voice was solemn, flat. 15 years. Justice landed like a stone and tasted like ash. 15. My knees weakened. 15 years carved out of my daughter's life like pages torn from a book. The prosecutor nodded, satisfied. The defense attorney scribbled on a pad, already thinking of appeals he didn't believe in. Sophia stood, composed but weary. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she finally spoke. Her voice was soft, raw, but each word cut deep. I don't regret loving my mother. I don't regret hating what happened to her memory. What I regret is letting that hate grow so loud it drowned everything else, even him. For a flicker, her eyes met mine, just long enough to cut me open. Then she looked away. The gavel fell. The chains clinked. They led her out again. It was over for the court, but for me the quiet was just beginning. Outside, cold sunlight struck me like a stranger's hand. Reporters pressed close, questions flying like arrows. Do you feel justice was served? Do you forgive her? I didn't answer, because justice and forgiveness were words for other people. What I carried wasn't verdict or absolution. It was silence, and silence was heavier than any sentence. That night, I sat at the same kitchen table where the cake had rested, ribbon glinting gold. I poured a glass of water, stared at it, and whispered into the air, "Happy birthday, Sophia." The house didn't answer. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Silence swallowed both. Weeks later, a letter came from Henry. The handwriting trembled, the ink digging too deep. "You saved my life even if you didn't mean to. Don't waste what's left of yours drowning in blame." The ink bled slightly where his hand had shaken. I could almost hear his laugh again. The sound from the garage years ago, grease on his hands, shouting my name over the grind of an engine. That memory lay cruel beside the weak scrawl on the page. I folded the letter, slid it into the fireproof box with the rest. The box felt heavier every time I closed it. Not from its contents, but from what they meant. Some nights, I dreamed of the farm, of Linda's laugh drifting from the kitchen, of Sophia barefoot in the grass, chasing fireflies, promises spoken into warm summer air. I always woke with tears dampening the pillow, reaching for people already gone. The verdict hadn't ended anything. It had only given silence a name. And in that silence, the sharpest truth remained. Sophia hadn't just tried to poison me. She had been poisoned long before. By grief, by silence, by me. Looking back, I ask myself again and again, where did I lose her? Was it the day I signed away the farm, convincing myself that survival mattered more than memory? Was it in every silence after, when I could have called, or knocked on her door, or simply said I'm sorry but didn't? I once believed love was obvious, that a daughter just knows her father's heart even when his mouth stays shut. But I learned too late. Love left unspoken too long curdles into something unrecognizable. I can't rewrite the choices that led us here. All I can do is sit with their weight, and in that weight, a truth pressed hard against me. The people we love can't hear what we don't say. They need our words, our presence, our clumsy, imperfect bridges across the distance. Because once silence settles in, it grows teeth, and it devours more than we ever expect. If you're listening now, maybe someone in your life has drifted too far. Maybe you think the time for reaching out has passed. I hope my story reminds you it hasn't. Not yet. Call them. Write the letter. Say the thing that feels too late or too small, because even broken words are stronger than silence. And if this story touched you, I'd be grateful if you subscribed, so you don't miss the next one. These stories aren't just mine. They belong to all of us who carry love and loss. Take care of yourselves. And may your nights close gently, with peace instead of regret.